The arrival and the warning. The night sky above Colorado's Cheyenne Mountain changed forever when the sensors detected them. At exactly 0347 hours, every alarm in the North American Aerospace Defense Command bunker began screaming at once. Lieutenant James Rodriguez stared at his screen, his coffee cup frozen halfway to his lips. The numbers made no sense. 600 objects, each one massive, each one decelerating from speeds that should have been impossible. They had come from beyond Neptune's orbit, appearing like ghosts materializing from the darkness of deep space. The objects were ships, alien ships, and they were heading straight toward Earth. Within minutes, the alert spread across the planet. Military bases from Washington to Moscow to Beijing went to full combat readiness. Space stations orbiting Earth and Mars received emergency protocols. On Luna Base, humanity's largest off-world military installation, Commander Sarah Chun was pulled from her sleep by an urgent call. Sarah was 42 years old, with sharp eyes that missed nothing and a mind trained by 20 years of military service. She had commanded Luna Base for 3 years, always preparing for threats that might come from space. Asteroid strikes, solar storms, rogue nations attempting to weaponize orbital platforms. But she had also prepared for this, the possibility that someday something would come from beyond human space, something that did not belong to humanity. She reached the command center in under 4 minutes, still fastening her uniform jacket. The room buzzed with controlled chaos. Officers worked at dozens of stations, their faces illuminated by glowing screens. The main display showed a tactical view of the solar system. And there, moving inward from the outer edges, was a red cluster representing the alien fleet. "Status report," Sarah demanded. Her voice cutting through the noise. Major Wei Lin looked up from his station, his face pale. "Commander, we have confirmed 600 vessels. They are maintaining a standard attack formation. Based on their trajectory and current speed, they will reach Earth orbit in 72 hours. Sarah studied the formation on the screen. She had studied military tactics from every human conflict in history. She recognized an invasion fleet when she saw one. These ships were not arranged for exploration or peaceful contact. They were positioned for conquest. "Have they attempted any communication?" she asked. "Yes, Commander," Wei replied. 5 minutes ago. Audio and visual. Broadcasting on all frequencies. It is playing now across every network on Earth." Sarah turned to the screen as the alien message played. The face that appeared was humanoid, but distinctly alien. Pale green skin stretched over sharp features. 4 eyes arranged in a diamond pattern on the face. A mouth that moved in ways that seemed wrong. When it spoke, the words came in perfect English, which meant they had been studying humanity for some time. "Primitive species of the third planet," the alien said, its voice cold and mechanical. "I am Commander Vexther of the Kryn Empire. Your world has been selected for integration into our domain. You will cease all military operations immediately. You will prepare to receive our occupation forces. You have 72 hours to comply. Resistance will result in the complete destruction of your civilization. This is your only warning." The message ended. Silence filled the command center. Sarah felt anger rise in her chest, but she pushed it down. Emotion had no place in command decisions. She needed to think clearly. "Get me a link to Earth Defense Council. Priority Alpha." Within an hour, Sarah was in a secure video conference with Earth's leadership. President Elena Volkov of the United Earth Alliance appeared on screen, along with military commanders from every major nation. Also present was Ambassador Marcus Wells, humanity's chief diplomat and the man responsible for first contact protocols. Marcus was 60 years old, with gray hair and a face lined by decades of negotiating peace between warring nations. He had spent his entire career believing that any conflict could be resolved through dialogue. He had ended wars, prevented nuclear exchanges, and brought sworn enemies to the same table. But as he listened to the Kryn ultimatum, something cold settled in his stomach. "We must attempt communication," Marcus said, his voice steady despite his inner turmoil. "We need to understand their intentions. Perhaps there has been a misunderstanding." President Volkov nodded. "Agreed. Ambassador Wells, you have authorization to make contact. But Commander Chun, I want every defensive asset we have ready to deploy. If talking fails, we need to be prepared." For the next 24 hours, Marcus tried everything. He broadcast messages in every language humans knew. He sent mathematical proofs to show intelligence. He transmitted humanity's history, art, music, and literature. He explained that Earth was home to 8 billion people, that humanity had dreams and hopes and families. He begged for dialogue, for understanding, for a chance to find peace. The Kryn Empire responded once. Commander Vexter's face appeared again, this time with what might have been amusement in his 4 eyes. "Your pleading is noted, Ambassador, but it changes nothing. We have integrated 47 species into the Kryn Empire. All of them offered the same arguments. All of them believed they were special. All of them surrendered when they realized the alternative was extinction. You have 48 hours remaining." The transmission ended. Marcus sat in his office, staring at the blank screen. He had failed. For the first time in his career, words had accomplished nothing. On Luna Base, Sarah Chun gathered her senior officers. The command center had been transformed into a war room. Holographic displays showed every human asset in the solar system. Defense platforms, missile batteries, fighter squadrons, hidden weapons that had been built in secret, hoping they would never be needed. Captain David Okonkwo stood at attention, reviewing the tactical data. David was 35 years old, the youngest captain in the Earth Defense Fleet. He commanded the carrier strike group Valiant, which included 50 of humanity's most advanced fighters. David had grown up in Legas, watching the stars and dreaming of flying among them. He had trained for 10 years to become a pilot, and another 5 to reach command. He was brilliant, fearless, and absolutely loyal to his crew. Asterisk. Beside him stood Dr. Yuki Tanaka, chief scientist of Project Sentinel. Yuki was 40 years old, with intense eyes that seemed to calculate probabilities constantly. She had been born on Mars, part of the first generation of humans raised off-world. For 15 years, she had led a secret project developing weapons based on theories that most scientists said were impossible. Quantum disruption fields, relativistic projectiles, gravity manipulation devices, weapons that could level the playing field against a superior force. Sarah looked at each of them in turn. "The aliens have given us 72 hours. They expect us to surrender. They think we are primitives who will collapse at the first sign of superior force. They are wrong." She activated a holographic recording. It showed humanity's complete military history. Every war, every weapon, every tactic developed over 10,000 years of organized conflict. The Romang legions, the Mongol hordes, naval warfare, aerial combat, nuclear deterrence, guerrilla tactics, cyber warfare. Humanity had spent its entire existence learning how to fight and survive. "We are going to send them this data," Sarah said. "Everything. Every brutal lesson humanity learned fighting itself. And we are going to give them a warning of our own." Major Wei looked skeptical. "Commander, with respect, they have 600 warships. Even with Project Sentinel, we are outnumbered 10 to 1. What makes you think a warning will matter to them?" Asterisk. Sarah's expression hardened. "Because we are going to make it very clear what happens when you ignore a human warning." 6 hours later, every human military channel synchronized for a single broadcast. Commander Sarah Chun stood before the camera, her uniform crisp, her bearing military perfect. Behind her, the Earth rotated slowly, beautiful and blue. When she spoke, her voice carried to every corner of human civilization and out into space, directly toward the approaching Kryn fleet. Commander Vexther of the Kryn Empire. This is Commander Sarah Chun of Earth Defense Command. We have received your ultimatum. We are sending you our response, along with a complete database of humanity's military history. I strongly suggest you review it carefully. She paused, letting the weight of her words settle. You believe we are primitives. You believe we will surrender out of fear. You are mistaken on both counts. Humanity has faced extinction dozens of times in our history. Ice ages, plagues, asteroids, nuclear weapons. Each time we survived. Each time we grew stronger. We did not reach the stars because we give up when threatened. We reached the stars because we refused to accept defeat. Sarah's voice grew colder. You have given us 72 hours to surrender. We are giving you the same 72 hours to turn your fleet around and leave our system. This is your final warning. We do not want war. But if you force us to fight, you will discover why humanity has survived every threat we have ever faced. You will learn why giving humans time to prepare, then ignoring their warnings, is the worst tactical mistake you could possibly make. She leaned forward slightly, her eyes boring into the camera. We have prepared defenses you cannot imagine. We have weapons your sensors will not detect. We have tactics your commanders have never encountered. We have 8 billion people who will fight for every meter of our world. And we have something you clearly lack. We have the will to resist. Sarah straightened. Turn your ships around, Commander Vexther. Leave our system. Find easier prey elsewhere. Because if you continue on your current course, if you ignore this warning, you will regret it. That is not a threat. That is a promise. You have 72 hours to decide. Choose wisely. The broadcast ended. The database transmitted. 10,000 years of human warfare, compressed and sent directly to the Kryn flagship. Every battle, every strategy, every weapon. Every time humanity had been pushed to the edge and fought back with everything it had. On the Kryn flagship Glory of Conquest, Commander Vexther watched the human transmission with his officers. When it ended, several of them looked uneasy. Junior Officer Kreval had been reviewing the human military database, and what he found disturbed him. Commander, Kreval said hesitantly, these humans have an unusual history. They have been fighting wars for their entire existence. Some of their conflicts killed millions of their own kind. They have developed weapons that could destroy their entire planet, yet they survived. They seem to have an abnormal resistance to intimidation. Vexther waved a dismissive hand. Propaganda. Desperate attempts to frighten us. Every primitive species tries to appear fierce when facing the inevitable. I have conquered 47 worlds, Kreval. I have heard every plea, every threat, every desperate promise of resistance. In the end, they all surrender. These humans will be no different. But even as he said it, Vexther felt a small twinge of doubt. The human commander's eyes had shown no fear, only cold determination. And that database they had sent. Who would send their complete military history to an enemy unless they believed it would actually give that enemy pause? He pushed the thought aside. The fleet would continue. In 72 hours, Earth would belong to the Kryn Empire. And these humans would learn their place in the galaxy, like all the others before them. Across human space, people received the news. Commander Chun's warning had been broadcast everywhere. Some people panicked. Some prayed. But most did something unexpected. They volunteered. Millions of humans showed up at recruitment centers, ready to fight. Engineers worked around the clock to prepare defenses. Scientists activated secret projects. Families hugged each other tightly and got to work doing whatever they could to help. On Luna Base, Captain Okonkwo briefed his pilots. 50 young men and women, the best humanity had to offer, strapped into fighters designed for one purpose: to protect Earth at any cost. David looked at each face, seeing fear, but also determination. "They think we are weak," David told his squadron. "They think we will break easily. Let us show them what happens when you threaten human homes. Let us show them what we are really made of. Check your systems. Trust your training. And remember, we gave them fair warning. Whatever happens next is their choice, not ours." In her laboratory deep beneath Luna's surface, Dr. Tanaka made final adjustments to Project Sentinel's weapons. The quantum disruptors hummed with barely contained power. The relativistic cannons charged their magnetic coils. And the gravity well generators, humanity's most secret and dangerous weapons, waited in silence for their moment. UK, I thought about her parents, still living in the Martian colony. She thought about her sister's children, growing up on Earth. She thought about all the humans living their lives, unaware of how close they were to extinction. She checked each weapon system one more time, then sent her status report to Commander Chun. Project Sentinel was ready. The countdown continued. 72 hours became 48, then 24, then 12. The Kryn fleet did not slow down. They did not change course. They did not respond to humanity's warning in any way, except to continue their advance. Ambassador Marcus Wells sat in his office, looking at the Earth through his window. He had dedicated his life to peace. He had always believed that understanding could prevent war. But now he understood something new. Sometimes peace is not possible. Sometimes the only choice is to stand and fight, or to surrender everything that makes life worth living. He opened a communication channel to Commander Chun. "Sarah," he said quietly, "I tried everything. I failed." Sarah's face appeared on the screen, her expression gentle despite the circumstances. "Marcus, you did not fail. You gave them every chance to choose peace. They rejected it. What happens now is their responsibility, not yours. We offered mercy. They refused it. Now we will show them the other side of humanity." The final hours ticked away. The Kryn fleet entered the asteroid belt, the last natural barrier before Earth. Commander Vexter sat in his command chair, already composing his victory message. His ships maintained perfect formation, shields at normal power, weapons ready, but not yet charged. They had done this so many times before. On Luna Base, Commander Sarah Chun stood in the command center, surrounded by her officers. Every human defensive position reported ready. Every weapon was charged. Every pilot was in position. The trap was set. All that remained was to see if the Kryn would ignore the warning one final time. Sarah opened the fleet-wide channel, her voice calm and steady. "All stations, this is Commander Chun. Weapons free. Engage on my mark. Show them why they should have listened." The Kryn fleet crossed into the asteroid belt, and humanity's final warning became a terrible reality. Asterisk the battle and the lesson. Asteroid belt seemed peaceful as the Kryn fleet entered it. 600 warships moved in perfect formation, their hulls gleaming under the distant sun. Commander Vexter watched his displays with satisfaction. In just a few more hours, they would reach Earth orbit. The primitives had not fired a single shot. Perhaps they had finally understood the futility of resistance. Then the asteroids exploded. What Vexter did not know was that for the past 6 months, human engineering teams had been working in secret throughout the asteroid belt. They had hollowed out hundreds of asteroids and filled them with weapons. Not ordinary explosives, but quantum disruption mines designed by Dr. Tanaka's team. Each mine created a localized field that destabilized matter at the atomic level. The mines detonated simultaneously, triggered by sensors that detected the Kryn ships crossing invisible threshold lines. 50 asteroids exploded at once, and the space between them filled with quantum disruption fields. The effect was instantaneous and devastating. 40 Kryn warships simply came apart. Their hulls did not explode or burn. They disintegrated. Metal, plastic, composite materials all lost their atomic cohesion and fell apart like sand castles in a wave. The ships collapsed inward, their structures failing as the very bonds holding matter together ceased to function. Thousands of Kryn warriors died in seconds, their bodies breaking down into component molecules before they could even scream. On the Kryn flagship, alarms shrieked. Officers shouted in panic. Vexter stared at his tactical display in disbelief. 40 ships gone in an instant. 40 ships that had been there one moment and simply ceased to exist the next. What kind of weapon could do that? The humans were supposed to be primitives. They were supposed to use crude missiles and kinetic weapons. Evasive maneuvers, Vexter roared. Scatter formation. Charge all weapons. Find the source of that attack and destroy it. But before the Kryn fleet could react, the second wave hit. From concealed positions throughout the asteroid belt, human defense platforms activated. These were not simple gun emplacements. They were relativistic cannons, weapons that accelerated projectiles to 98% of light speed. The platforms had been built into asteroids over the past decade, part of Earth's long-term defense planning. Each cannon was powered by a fusion reactor and used electromagnetic acceleration to launch tungsten rods. At near light speed, these rods became something more than mere projectiles. They became packets of pure kinetic energy that nothing could stop. 20 platforms fired simultaneously. 20 tungsten rods crossed the distance to the Kryn fleet in fractions of a second. When they hit, the results were catastrophic. A rod struck a Kryn battleship amidships. The kinetic energy release was equivalent to a nuclear explosion, but without the radiation. The battleship simply exploded, torn apart by forces that overwhelmed its shields and armor in an instant. Debris spread outward in an expanding sphere, traveling at velocities that turned each fragment into a secondary weapon. Another rod passed completely through 3 Kryn cruisers in a line, the projectile barely slowing as it punched through hull after hull. The ships listed sideways, atmosphere and fluids venting into space, internal bulkheads collapsing as structural integrity failed. In 90 seconds, the Kryn Empire lost 65 ships, more than 10% of their invasion fleet, destroyed before they could fire a single shot in response. On Luna Base, Commander Sarah Chun watched the tactical display with grim satisfaction. The trap had worked perfectly, but she knew this was only the beginning. The Kryn still had over 500 ships. The real battle was just starting. "Captain Okonkwo," she said into her communicator, "execute Alpha Strike. Make it count." High above the lunar surface, Captain David Okonkwo received the order. He was strapped into the cockpit of his fighter, the lead ship of Valiant Squadron. Around him, 49 other fighters hung in space, their engines cold, their hulls coated with stealth composites that made them nearly invisible to sensors. David had been born for this moment. Every hour of training, every simulation, every test flight had prepared him for combat against an enemy that outnumbered and outgunned humanity. But humans had something the Kryn did not. They had creativity. They had adaptability. They had the ability to look at impossible odds and find a way to win anyway. "Valiant Squadron, this is Valiant 1, David said calmly. "Light them up. Weapons free. Show these invaders what human pilots can do." 50 fighters ignited their engines simultaneously. They accelerated from 0 to maximum velocity in seconds, the advanced drives pushing them at G-forces that would kill an unprotected human. But the pilots wore pressure suits connected to gel-filled acceleration couches that distributed the forces across their entire bodies. They could pull maneuvers that no ordinary pilot could survive. The fighters split into 5 groups, each targeting a different section of the Kryn formation. They moved like schools of fish, individual ships weaving around each other in patterns that seemed chaotic, but were actually precisely coordinated. The Kryn point defense systems tried to track them and failed. The human fighters were too small, too fast, and moved too unpredictably. David led his team straight toward a Kryn carrier, a massive ship that held hundreds of enemy fighters. His targeting computer locked on. His finger hovered over the firing stud. "Fox 3, he said calmly, and pressed the button. A missile detached from his fighter's wing. But this was not an ordinary missile. It was a plasma lance, a weapon that created a focused beam of superheated matter held together by magnetic fields. The lance crossed the distance to the carrier in 2 seconds and punched through its shields like they were not there. The beam burned into the carrier's hull, melting through armor plating, cutting deep into the ship's interior. The carrier's fighter bay exploded as the beam ignited fuel and ammunition stores. The explosion tore through multiple decks, rupturing power conduits and life support systems. The massive ship began to list, its engines failing, atmosphere venting from dozens of breaches. All around the Kryn fleet, the same scene repeated. Human fighters darted in, fired their weapons, and disappeared before the enemy could respond. Each attack was precise, targeting vulnerable points identified by months of sensor analysis. The Kryn had superior numbers, but they were fighting an enemy they did not understand. On the Kryn flagship, Commander Vexter finally understood the magnitude of his mistake. Junior Officer Kreval had been right. The humans were not like other species the Kryn had conquered. These primitives fought with a ferocity and skill that matched anything in the Empire's military history. "Get me tactical analysis," Vexter demanded. "How are they doing this? Our sensors should detect their positions. Our weapons should destroy them. Why are we losing?" The tactical officer, a veteran of 30 campaigns, studied the data with growing horror. "Commander, they are using tactics we have never encountered. Their fighters operate in coordinated groups, but maintain complete autonomy. They exploit gaps in our formation that should not exist. And their weapons technology is more advanced than our intelligence suggested. These are not primitives, Commander. These are warriors." Vexter felt something he had not experienced in decades. Fear. Real, genuine fear. He had conquered 47 worlds, but none of them had fought back like this. None of them had weapons that disintegrated matter or projectiles that moved at near light speed. None of them had pilots who flew like demons and struck with surgical precision. "All ships, focus fire," he ordered. "Concentrate our weapons. Bring down those fighters. And somebody find their command center and destroy it." But even as he gave the orders, Vexter knew they were in serious trouble. The humans had given him 72 hours of warning. 72 hours to study their military history, to understand what he was facing. He had dismissed it as primitive propaganda. Now he realized that database had been a gift, a final chance to avoid this nightmare. And he had thrown it away. Deep beneath Luna's surface, Dr. Yuki Tanaka watched the battle unfold on her monitors. The quantum mines and relativistic cannons had performed exactly as designed. Captain Okonkwo's fighters were exceeding even her optimistic projections. But the Kryn still had over 400 ships, and they were beginning to coordinate their response. It was time for Project Sentinel's final weapon. The one humanity had built hoping they would never need to use it. The gravity well generator. Yuki's hands moved across her control panel with practiced precision. She had spent 15 years developing this technology, working from theoretical physics that most scientists said was impossible. The generator created artificial gravity fields of enormous strength, localized in space. It could crush ships like insects or tear them apart with tidal forces, but it was also dangerous. The generator drew massive amounts of power and produced side effects that were not fully understood. There was a chance, a small one, that activating it at full power might create a permanent gravitational anomaly. A wound in space that could not be healed. YUK? I pushed the fear aside. Her family was on Mars. Her sister's children were on Earth. If activating this weapon meant they survived, then she would accept the risk. Commander Chun, Yuki said into her communicator. Sentinel Primary is ready. Requesting authorization to fire. Sarah's face appeared on Yuki's screen. The commander looked tired, but determined. Authorized, Doctor. Target their command ship. Let us end this. Yuki locked the targeting system onto the Kryn flagship. Her finger hovered over the activation control. She thought about all the peaceful applications this technology could have had. Artificial gravity for space stations. Propulsion systems for interstellar travel. Terraforming tools for hostile worlds. Instead, humanity had turned it into a weapon because they had no choice. She pressed the button. The gravity well generator, hidden inside a hollowed-out asteroid, activated. It drew power from 3 fusion reactors simultaneously, channeling enormous energies into a device no larger than a transport shuttle. Space itself warped around the generator as it built up to full strength. Then it fired. An invisible beam of gravitational force crossed the distance to the Kryn flagship in an instant. The beam was not made of particles or energy in any conventional sense. It was a distortion in the fabric of spacetime itself. The effect on the flagship was immediate and terrible. The ship's hull began to compress as artificial gravity hundreds of times stronger than Earth's pulled at every atom. Metal groaned and buckled. Internal bulkheads collapsed. The Kryn crew experienced crushing forces that their bodies could not withstand. Commander Vexter felt his bones breaking under impossible weight. His 4 eyes bulged as pressure built inside his skull. Around him, officers collapsed at their stations, their bodies flattened against the deck. Equipment sparked and exploded as structural supports failed. In his final moments, Vexter understood the truth. The humans had not been bluffing. They had not been making empty threats. They had given him fair warning, shown him their complete military history, and offered him a chance to leave peacefully. And he, in his arrogance, had ignored it all. Asterisk. The flagship imploded. The massive warship, over 2 kilometers long, compressed into a sphere less than 50 meters across. Everything inside, every warrior, every system, every piece of equipment, crushed into a dense ball of compacted matter. Then, as the gravity well shut off, the compressed mass exploded outward in a burst of superheated debris. The other Kryn ships saw their flagship die. They saw their commander and thousands of their comrades killed in seconds by a weapon they could not fight or defend against. And they finally understood what the humans had been trying to tell them. This species was not primitive. They were not weak. They were survivors who had spent 10,000 years learning how to fight and win against impossible odds. They had weapons that defied understanding and tactics that no amount of numerical superiority could overcome. And most importantly, they had the will to use everything at their disposal to defend their home. The Kryn fleet broke. Ships began to turn away, abandoning formation, fleeing back toward the outer system. Some tried to maintain discipline, but panic spread like wildfire. They had come expecting easy conquest. Instead, they had found warriors who made the legendary Kryn military look like amateurs. On Luna Base, Commander Sarah Chun watched the enemy retreat. She felt no joy in the victory, only relief that it had worked. But she knew the battle was not quite over. The Kryn needed to understand this lesson completely, or they would come back with more ships and try again. She opened a communication channel, broadcasting directly to the fleeing Kryn fleet. Her voice was calm, but carried absolute authority. Kryn Empire, this is Commander Sarah Chun. Your invasion has failed. Your flagship is destroyed. Your fleet is broken. You are now fleeing from the primitive species you thought to conquer easily. She paused, letting her words sink in. We gave you fair warning. We told you to study our history. We explained what happens when you threaten humanity and ignore our warnings. You chose not to listen. This is the result. Sarah's expression hardened. You are leaving our system now. Some of you will survive to return home. When you do, you will deliver a message to your empire. Tell them Earth is defended. Tell them humanity does not surrender. Tell them we offered peace and you chose war. And tell them that if the Kryn Empire ever approaches our system again, we will not give another warning. We will simply destroy you. She leaned forward. But we are not monsters. We could pursue your fleet and destroy every ship. We could ensure none of you return home. We are choosing not to do that. We are allowing you to leave. Consider it a final demonstration of human mercy. You will not receive it again. The transmission ended. The Kryn fleet continued its retreat, breaking into smaller groups as ships fled at maximum speed. Within 6 hours, the last enemy vessel had crossed beyond Neptune's orbit and jumped faster than light travel, disappearing from human sensors. The battle was over. Humanity had won. Ambassador Marcus Wells stood in the observation deck, looking at Earth through the reinforced windows. He had spent his entire career believing in the power of words, in the possibility of peace through understanding. He still believed it, but now he understood something else. Sometimes, peace is only possible when you prove you are willing and able to fight for it. Captain David Okonkwo brought his squadron back to Luna Base. All 50 fighters returned safely, though several were heavily damaged. David climbed out of his cockpit, exhausted but alive. His squadron gathered around him, young faces showing relief and pride. They had faced an empire that conquered 47 worlds, and they had won. Dr. Yuki Tanaka shut down Project Sentinel systems. The gravity well generator had worked perfectly, though the power surge had damaged 2 of the 3 fusion reactors. It would take months to repair, but it did not matter. The weapon had done its job. Humanity had shown the galaxy that Earth was not helpless prey. In the days that followed, humanity celebrated but also mourned. The battle had cost lives. 3 defense platforms had been destroyed by Kryn return fire before the fleet retreated. 47 human defenders had died protecting their world. Their names would be remembered. Memorials would be built. They had given everything so that billions could continue to live free. The United Earth Alliance received messages from other species across the galaxy. Some offered congratulations. Some offered trade agreements. Some simply acknowledged that humanity was now a power to be respected. The Kryn Empire sent no message, but intelligence reports indicated they had abandoned all expansion plans in human-controlled space. Commander, Sarah Chun stood before a memorial wall where the names of the fallen were inscribed. She touched the cool metal, thinking about the people who had trusted her leadership and paid the ultimate price. She had given the Kryn every chance to avoid this outcome. She had warned them fairly. They had chosen to ignore it. Commander, Major Wei said quietly, approaching from behind. We are receiving reports from our deep space sensors. 3 other species that were marked as Kryn Empire targets have declared independence. The Empire's reputation for invincibility is broken. Their conquests are collapsing. Sarah nodded slowly. Good. Perhaps something positive could come from this tragedy. Perhaps other species would be free because humanity had stood and fought. Perhaps the galaxy would learn that conquest was not inevitable, that even the smallest species could resist if they had courage and determination. She thought about the warning she had given Commander Vexter. 72 hours to turn around and leave. 72 hours that he had wasted in arrogance and overconfidence. If he had listened, thousands of his people would still be alive. His fleet would still be intact. His empire's reputation would not be shattered, but he had not listened. And now the galaxy knew what happened when you ignored a human warning. Sarah walked back to the command center. There was work to do, repairs to coordinate, defenses to strengthen, new technologies to develop. Because while the Kryn had been defeated, there might be other threats in the future. Other species that would see humanity and think easy target. They would be wrong. Earth was defended by people who refused to surrender, who turned warnings into promises, and who would fight with everything they had to protect their home. The Kryn Empire had learned this lesson the hard way. Sarah hoped, for the sake of everyone in the galaxy, that others would be wiser, that they would remember what happened when an invasion fleet ignored Earth's final warning, that they would understand humanity offered peace first, but possessed the strength to wage war if necessary. The stars continued to turn above Luna Base. Earth rotated peacefully below. And throughout human space, people went back to their lives, secure in the knowledge that when threatened with extinction, their defenders had stood firm. Humanity had given the invasion fleet a final warning to depart. The fleet had ignored it. And now, scattered across the asteroid belt, the wreckage of Kryn warships serve as a permanent reminder. A message written in metal and fire for any species that might come after. The message was simple. We warned you. End of story. Asterisk.